Our marching band faithfully repeats its motto, "Eyes with pride," after each and every performance we give. However, our motto doesn't only apply to marching band kids anymore. It applies to nerds across the entire nation that have found themselves able to unite and understand each other through today's youth nerd culture. The object that I have with me today is none other than the marching band plume itself, the funny looking stick that sits on top of our even weirder looking hats. Now, not only does this plume represent today's nerd culture, it also represents the culture of which I personally find myself identifying with the most. Moving back to my first main point, that the plume represents today's nerd culture. Marching band essentially epitomizes today's geeky or nerdy culture. And what's nerdier than marching around on a field while playing instruments in weird-looking uniforms and funny hats? Not to mention the fact that we, day in and day out, get ridiculed and made fun of for being the nerds or the geeks, whether it is because we are involved in music or because we do in fact have to wear extremely odd-looking uniforms. Marching band still does epitomize nerd culture and those involved with it. However, these kids who are ridiculed every day of their lives for being involved in something that is considered nerdy or geeky also happen to be the future of our entire nation. Because someday, the nerds really will take over and run businesses, lawyers' office, doctors' offices, anything and everything that you can think of. Take Bill Jobs and Steve Gates, for example. I'm sure in their adolescence they both were ridiculed and called everything from a nerd to a geek to a dork. But look at them today. Both have created and invested in multi-billion-dollar companies that have gone on to help people across the globe. These two men are just living proof of the fact that nerds are the future. Moving on to my second main point, that I personally happen to identify with this nerd culture more than any other culture I can come up with. Mainly because I truly do love nerdy activities, namely reading and, yes, marching band. I find great comfort in them and I take great pride and joy in both of them. And maybe this, in and of itself, is the reason why I identify with nerd culture the most. Because they have given me confidence. As I progress through different book series, or I play harder and harder pieces of music, I find myself being more sure of myself, not only in those activities, but in other day-to-day activities as well. That being said, I have also met many wonderful people through marching band, through various nerdy or geeky clubs at school, whom I can easily relate to. We have wonderful conversations about music, about the latest books we've read, about anything and everything that could be, or maybe could not be, considered nerdy or geeky. This marching band plume identifies and represents what is known as today's nerd youth culture. This is also the culture that I myself identify with the most. Now, Eyes with Pride may be specific to the marching band in my own personal school, but kids across the entire nation are learning to unite and identify with themselves underneath this nerd culture. And united, these kids will in fact grow to be our successful future.